Hello everybody, welcome to the Daily Sip. My name is Oliver. My mission is to bring you closer to organic Japanese green tea, and today what we're gonna dive into is the 5 reasons why to consume a ceremonial or premium grade matcha. So when we hop directly into the field of matcha, first off, what matcha is. There we are talking about the powdered green tea form of Japanese green tea. Most of the matcha consumed in the world is coming out of Japan. There's some Chinese matcha, but I will concentrate myself on Japanese matcha and really have a look or a deeper look into this powdered form of green tea. So the first point when we look into matcha itself is when we have the two qualities. So on the one hand, we have culinary grade matcha or cooking grade matcha, or latte grade matcha, how it is also called. And on the other hand, we have ceremonial grade or premium grade matcha. There, what we can see and what we can notice in terms of flavor is that actually the matcha which is made out of ceremonial grade, or which is in the more premium segment, there we have a much richer flavor profile. There are different aspects to this. So one is when we compare the culinary grade and the premium or ceremonial grade, is that the tea is actually shaded. The shading is pushing the nutrients in the leaves. There's more caffeine, there are more amino acids, there are more essential oils. So there it just triggers everything a little bit higher, and it makes the tea itself richer. So the shading is very, very important. What we also see is that we have, thanks to the higher amount of amino acids, we have also a lower amount and a counterbalanced amount of catechins, making the tea less astringent and more pleasureful to drink. So it's a little bit sweeter, smoother. Also the texture is different. So quite a big difference between the culinary grade unshaded and the ceremonial grade, premium grade shaded sencha. And then what we also know is when we dive into the area of ceremonial grade matcha, there are really the 3 to 5 top leaves used of the tea plant. The tea leaves are destemmed, deveined, so really only the best small parts of the highest grade leaves of the tea plants of the first harvest are used. So there we are really talking about a quality on its own. And when we look into the area of culinary, cooking grade or latte grade matcha, there actually we are talking about a tea where also sometimes stems are used. Deveined is often not part of the process, and shading is not applied to these tea leaves, and therefore the flavor profile of these matcha is just more astringent and a little bit flatter and less complex in terms of taste profile. When we go into the visual aspect, so this is the second point I want to talk about after flavor, is just the quality in terms of color. So when we have a look at these two matchas, we see clearly here we have more of a yellowish, a little bit less strong flavor profile or kind of a visual aspect in terms of this green color. Here we are looking at a very beautiful green color of the matcha. So when I put them next to each other, so we clearly see that actually here we have a more of kind of a little bit of a lighter color. It goes a little bit more in the yellowish, sometimes even grayish color, and this super intense green, deep green color comes from the fact that when you're looking at culinary grade matcha, there the tea leaves are often a little bit brighter, green, bright, going into the yellowish color, due to the fact that the sun rays, they touch the tea leaves and then they're just getting brighter. And when we talk about this intense green color, there we talk about darker green colors, which you are seeing when you're shading the tea leaves. So once when we visited, for example, the farm of Mr. Fujisaka, there I had the opportunity to really put 2 leaves next to each other, one shaded, one the unshaded, and there I could really see the difference between the color of these 2 leaves, and then also realize, okay, there really when you want to have a very beautiful, smooth, sweet matcha, it has to be this more intense green and darker color. Meanwhile, the culinary grade or the latte grade just has a little bit more pale, nearly grayish or yellowish color. So that's the main difference in terms of color. when we go to a third part, and here I go into the mixing of the matcha. So let's prepare the matcha. As always, I brought Matcha 1 with me. So this is just a tea bowl. If you have a bowl at home, you can use also your cereal bowl. The good thing about the Chawan is that it at the bottom a little bit flatter, so it gives more space then to whisk, which I will show you. So I'm gonna move my matcha here and I'm gonna sift it through. So very important, you see the sifter, I put the powder in and I just gonna sift it through. So that's a super easy thing to do to get rid of the clumps which are just forming. This is a normal and natural process which is happening as soon as the matcha is exposed or touches just the air, due to the fact that we have a little bit of a humidity and then we have clumps forming, and we just have to sift the matcha through. This helps a lot to have a matcha which doesn't have any clumps. So when we have done this process, what we can see is that we have a very fine powder, and this we're gonna now whisk with my chasen, with my matcha whisk or bamboo whisk, how it is as well called. And we're gonna just add 3 ounces of water, 70 milliliters of water, that's perfect. And then we're gonna just mix it in a zigzag mode. And you will see that there's a beautiful foam that will form. If you don't have the matcha whisk, you can also use a milk frother, and even a normal whisk is also a possibility. But this is then the ceremonial grade matcha. Very beautiful foam. Top of the matcha. Leave this here. I go to round number 2. Round number 2 is the culinary grade. Do the same here. So I put in the powder, 2 grams, 1 teaspoon. And I'm gonna sift it as well. So here doing the same. So you really can see how the powder is falling down into the bowl. And this takes around 15 to 30 seconds depending on the fine mesh you're using, but a finer mesh is always better due to the fact that you will just have less crumbs in your matcha. Voila! Then after having done this, we're gonna whisk it as well. So same amount of water, 3 ounces, 70 milliliter. And then we're gonna whisk this with the same whisk. Zigzag motion. And we're gonna get also a little bit of foam with this matcha here, so you can see it. Whoa. So it looks quite similar in terms of foam. So you have with both matchas, you have a little bit of foam which is forming. But what we can see here is the density of the foam is much better. So this, in my opinion, my interpretation is really coming from the fact that here we have more amino acids, so we have a little bit more of proteins in the tea, mainly L-theanine. Here we have a little bit less, and this just makes the foam finer and the bubbles a little bit bigger. And in terms of taste, kind of texture, when I compare these two, have quite a kind of smooth, silky texture of this matcha. And when I go into the culinary grade, it is much less present. Also here, I get a little bit of a different taste profile, more astringent, a little bit more dusty. It's not as beautifully green, kind of very complex, which I get from the ceremonial grade matcha. Here I get much more kind of a a little bit of a powdery form. It's not that intense in this green taste profile, not fresh spinach, no edamame, but more of an astringent, a little bit more kind of, a little bit this kind of later grass, summer grass notes, which are absolutely present, but much less than this one here. We're talking about the same cultivar. Cultivar is the tea, green tea type. Here I get much more kind of a round sweetness. When I have a sip again, it's beautiful, fresh. I get a little bit of citrusy. I get edamame, fresh spinach. I get a little bit of green raisin, fresh green raisin, a little bit of cucumber, and also a very nice sweet tone in the end. I would say it's going a little bit into a cashewy nutty, so sweet nutty flavor profile mixed with a little bit of fruit, maybe a little bit of mango. So this is actually a super complex matcha, while here already the astringency kind of pushes me back, like enjoying the tea not that much. It's just a little bit more in a powdery, there's some greenness, there's some freshness, there's some citrusy flavor profiles with it, but pushing it quite strongly into kind of the area of astringency. And that's really the main difference between two, much more enjoyable. That's why also culinary grade, latte grade, or a cooking grade matcha, to enjoy it with a little bit of cream, a little bit of sugar or milk, is absolutely a way to go with this matcha. In terms of taste profile, definitely if you want to go for a pure matcha, then the ceremonial grade is definitely a good option. Good. When we look actually at one of the very important points about matcha, maybe you have already heard of it, is the caffeine level. So Gyokuro on the leaf tea side and on the powder tea side is the ceremonial grade matcha, are actually the teas with the highest amount of caffeine in their leaves. The reason is, again, the shading process. Shading process is really important in terms of Japanese green tea, especially nowadays, because more and more of shading is applied to make the tea sweeter. But what it also does is that actually the plant is put into a little bit of a stress situation, which doesn't mean that you're drinking a stressed plant, but the plant just moves into more of a protective way of being, and then producing more caffeine and producing more chlorophyll. And also thanks to the shading, which is not happening, the sunlights which are not, or the sunlight which is not touching the leaves, there actually the theanine level is kept quite high. So you have a high amount of caffeine and a high amount of chlorophyll, but also a high amount of theanine, which is then balancing out the caffeine content, meaning that you get much less jittery with matcha, and high amount of theanine has also another positive aspect, which I go into just a little bit later. But here you really have kind of this counterbalancing of the caffeine. So here we are at the level of a normal Arabica coffee. So matcha can absolutely be a replacement of your first or maybe of your second coffee cup during the day, and it really can compete in terms of caffeine with the coffee. And we look at the ceremonial grade, at a culinary grade or lower grade matcha, latte grade matcha, there it can go down to 34 milligrams. Meanwhile, here we are at 68 milligrams. So there's quite a big difference, and this is the fact, or this is coming from the fact that actually the ceremonial grade is shaded and the culinary grade is unshaded or not shaded, often coming from the second or third harvests, which are just not shaded, and therefore also the caffeine content is a little bit lower. Clearly you can compensate it with adding more powder, but in the end, if you compare gram per gram, you're better off in terms of caffeine with the ceremonial grade matcha. When we go into the next point, and this is what I was mentioning before, is especially the amino acid L-theanine. The L-theanine actually has a beautiful kind of effect on our brain, because it is able to break through the blood-brain barrier and trigger more alpha brain waves. Some of you might know this from meditation, longer meditation sessions, and even monks in Japan, they use matcha in their longer meditation session, because it allows them to stay concentrated and very calm thanks to this buffering effect, and thanks to the triggering of the alpha brain waves. then lets them to have a very intense meditation session and meditation period. So this is just a very positive aspect. And green tea itself is one of the richest sources in the nature of L-theanine. So that's also why a lot of people actually drink green tea, is not only thanks to the caffeine but also to the L-theanine, which is also linked to, after certain studies, to being kind of less stressed and also to better sleep. Clearly, when you drink it just before you go to bed, the caffeine content will keep you awake, but the L-theanine itself can really help you. And if you want, with matcha this is not possible, but with gyokuro you can cold brew it, so you extract a little bit less of the caffeine, and then you will feel that the L-theanine has an even stronger effect on you. But there the L-theanine has really an important role, but as I said before, L-theanine super important in the first harvest. Shaded green tea, as soon as you not shade the green tea, then the L-theanine level goes down dramatically. Sometimes we can talk up to 4 times less. So if you want to have this buffering effect of the matcha, then definitely you should go for a ceremonial grade matcha. If you are not very sensitive to caffeine, then absolutely you can go and also increase a little bit the amount of your culinary grade matcha in your matcha latte, for example, if you want to drink it. But what you have to be aware of, if you're more sensitive to caffeine like I am, then definitely the culinary grade has a little bit of a disadvantage versus the ceremonial grade matcha. And this is more or less it, what I wanted to talk about in these 5 points. So first, flavor, so more astringent and less complex, more smooth, more rich, and also kind of the texture is very, very different, a little bit more full-bodied. Color, we can see it here. Color, very big difference. Then the foam, giving it a smoother texture. Here is a little bit more liquid, not as dense as the ceremonial grade. Then we talk about caffeine, higher caffeine, down to half of the caffeine with the same amount of powder, and the L-theanine, which is also more present in the ceremonial grade. One big advantage that, and this is non-negligible, if we are looking into culinary grade matcha, there is the price point, and the price point is much lower. While we talk about ceremonial grade, often we can take around $1 per gram. So if you're using 2 grams per matcha, you know that you're actually drinking $2. Meanwhile, when we look at culinary grade, there you can go down to as around 20 to 30 cents per gram. So it's around 1/3 of the price. But nevertheless, the enjoyment is definitely higher with the ceremonial grade. And if you want to start into matcha, still I would suggest you to first dive a little bit into the world of the culinary grade. Kind of drink it with a latte, see what you like, maybe add a little bit of sugar, or a little bit of honey, or maybe agave syrup, and drink it always with a plant-based milk. Very important, because the casein in the dairy milk can buffer the effects of the polyphenols in the green tea, so the antioxidants. And when you're going a little bit into the direction of the ceremonial grade, maybe you can one-to-one sometimes kind of switch between these two before you then go fully into ceremonial grade matcha area. If you are a kind of a regular matcha drinker and sometimes you would still like to have a latte, but you don't really want to go back to the culinary grade, what I suggest is you really look out for Yabukita matcha. The Yabukita matcha is really helping in terms of this more vegetal, stronger matcha flavor. Sometimes when you have very fine and smooth matchas coming from a ceremonial grade quality, these are often okumidori or saimidori, so green tea type, cultivar type. And if you want to really have a strong, decent matcha latte, try to look for a Yabukita cultivar matcha. This is helping you definitely also to have this beautiful kind of matcha taste when you're doing a latte with your ceremonial grade matcha. Good. So this. I hope you liked it. Thanks a lot for watching, and I guess I see you soon. And don't forget, if you want to leave a comment, do it. Ask us any question. Otherwise, you can find us on more or less all of the social medias. Yeah. Happy to have you. Thanks a lot for watching. See you and bye bye.